as a kid, my experience with seeing something like an Alice Cooper record and listening to that, or David Bowie in particular, Led Zeppelin. It was obviously, let's, as much as we're going to talk about these other things, I want to make sure that, we say out, that this is great music, however so we're talking about great music, and none of this works, right? If the music itself isn't good. So especially at the time, and I personally think the 70s is probably is really the great decade for rock and popular music. And so, to be exposed at a kind of a young age to that, and to see the way in which people were not only experimenting musically, but experimenting with the presentation of the music, right? The album cover art, the lyrics, the kind of public personas that people presented, it all lended this kind of air of mystique. And I don't think I was alone in the 1970s to feel like there was some hidden knowledge, some special, that these musicians had special access to something. And yes, because it's rock and roll, and because it's infused with sex and infused with sort of sounds that are loud and just often distorted, that whatever they're connected to could feel, especially for, say, a 6 or 7-year-old kid, that it's something malevolent or evil or dangerous, I think is a better word, right? And so that was also definitely as a result of the pop culture, especially in the 1970s, where I think because the 1960s sort of psychedelic Aquarian dream didn't really come to pass, in the way that people had hoped, that, just sociologically speaking, a lot of really interesting and creative people were severely damaged, by drugs and alcohol, and just these kind of lifestyles that were in many ways part of sort of the 60s sensibility, even though it was a hopeful sort of, we're going to have peace, we'll end the war in Vietnam, we'll have equality,
right,
sexual liberation, all of that was, but there was this darker edge to it. And I think in the United States in particular, a few things happened that really darkened what the 60s meant, especially Charles Manson. Charles Manson, especially the idea that our sort of gurus were maybe actually nefarious, cult figures. I think maybe we put a little bit too much stock in it, but I do feel, and I think a lot of people will agree, that not too long after Woodstock, there was the stabbing at the Rolling Stones concert with
Altamont, right?
With Altamont, with the Hells Angels. And again, just suddenly, where was this other thing that the 60s was supposed to be? Now it's Manson and Hells Angels with knives. It just didn't feel the same. And so, whereas the spirituality of the 60s, and even the occult spirituality of the 60s, was sort of more brightly lit and psychedelic, by the time we're moving into 70s, at least from the pop culture, it's not necessarily the way people were practicing magic or the occult, but at least from the pop culture, things really did take this dark turn. So have a lot more TV shows and movies about the devil, Satan, The Exorcist, of course, is a really important example of that. There was a made-for-TV movie about these kids who worship Satan in their attic, and their beloved family German Shepherd was the agent of the devil, you know. So that was even just in our on our primetime television at home. This was sort of the atmosphere of what a non-mainstream Judeo-Christian spirituality really looked like. It wasn't the Dayglow 60s psychedelic Eastern mystical, right? It was something much darker and untoward and probably